Team. You guys sound so good. We're going to talk about the Ebenezer stone again to this year. I talked about this last year at this time. And so be thinking about that one thing this year that you're thankful for. This is the time of year when we pause and set aside a time to just say, thanks, God. And we can always find something to be thankful for. So my challenge for all of us this morning is to be thinking about that, to be thinking about what you are thankful for. Now, Samuel is in the beginning of the Bible. It's in the history books. And so it's before Psalm. If you're at Psalm, you need to go left to Samuel. It's right after Judges and before the Chronicles and the Kings. It's in the history portion. Samuel is a time, this particular chapter was, before Saul was anointed king. And you'll remember that it was Samuel who anointed him king. And then after Saul, he anointed David to be king. That's who Samuel is. This is his book. But what we're reading this morning was during the time of the Judges. Before they had a king, he spoke on behalf of God, and he would settle disputes, and he acted as a king for the people. And so this is the time period where we are. And so in this incident today, we see where God spares the Israelite people from the Philistines. Now, it's kind of hard for me to say Philistines. I've always said Philistines. Maybe that's because I'm from Palestine. And the Philistines are basically the Palestinians today. I mean, there's not a people group called the Philistines anymore. A lot of these old people groups in the Bible don't exist anymore. But the Israelites do, because they are God's chosen people, and we still have them to this day. But these other people groups have just kind of integrated into each other and into the other groups. So there aren't any Philistines as a group today. Well, have you found it? 1 Samuel 7, 10 through 13. Go ahead and stand with me, if you will. Let's read this together. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with a loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to the point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin, and he named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord helped us." So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. And God's people said, Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Well, the Philistines were attacking the Israelites, and they were about to get them. I mean, they were coming after them, and they had superior weaponry, and they were a formidable enemy. And they saw that God's people, the Jews, the Israelites, had gathered together in this place at Mizpah, some place out there. And they were gathered together, and they slaughtered an innocent lamb. Now that's very messianic. That's very symbolic, that it's innocent blood that is shed for the forgiveness of sin. And they were showing that they were repenting of their sins. These people had turned from God, and God was using an outside force to punish them for it. He does this throughout the the history of the Old Testament, we see this. And so he's doing this again here. You know, God uses the troubles in our lives and the trials and the difficulties to keep us focused on Him. And a lot of times when things are going so well for us, we get apathetic. And we start to forget about God. And we start to think that maybe we're doing all this on our own. And we start to forget that it's His power that gives us every single breath and every single heartbeat in every day of our lives. That's why Michael mentioned this morning that we opened our eyes this morning. That's a gift from God. And that's right. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. And so when we begin to get apathetic and we kind of start to forget about God a little bit because things are going so well, He has a tendency to use things in our lives to kind of refocus us back on Him. And He's doing this in this case. They're pouring water out on the ground, which is symbolic of repentance. And there's lots of good symbolism there. We'll always find good symbolism in the Old Testament, and it always points to Jesus. Well, so while the Israelites are together, the Philistines say, hey, they're sitting ducks. We can take them. I mean, look at them. They're up here killing this innocent lamb and having this basic worship service. And we'll just surround them and take them right here and now. And so the people cry out to Samuel. While he was sacrificing the burnt offerings, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle, verse 10 says. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines. He thundered against them and scared them. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, I want you to know that a naturalist person could look at that and say, okay, big deal, there was a thunderstorm. It thundered. That's not God. That's just nature. It happens. But a person with spiritual eyes realizes, oh no. No, this was more than just a thunderstorm. And the fact that there was a thunder at this particular place, at this particular time, see, the naturalist would say, it's just a coincidence. But a person with spiritual eyes will see that and say, that's God at work. You see, when I was driving here, Juddy and I were driving here this morning to church, and we could see all of these beautiful trees coming around the loop, and they start right in our front yard. We could just say, oh, well, that's just natural. That's just nature. It happens. You know, there's chloroform in the leaves, and in the fall, the chloroform pulls out of the leaf and leaves behind that color. They're always green in the summer. Chlorophyll is a good energy. It converts energy, sun's energy. But in the fall, it pulls out and it leaves colors. Now, the naturalist can look at that and just say, oh, yeah, that's cool. That's Mother Nature. That's just a natural event that happens. But if you look at it with spiritual eyes, you realize, oh, no. This is God at work showing us through natural events His majesty and His creativity and His power. It's just a taste of the colors that we're going to see in heaven. You know, our eyes only see a certain spectrum of the light spectrum. It's very narrow what our eyes can actually see. And I think when we get to heaven, it's going to be a little wider, and we're going to actually see colors that we couldn't even imagine now. And God is just showing us a little hint every fall with the beautiful colors. And they're just gorgeous. And so, how do you look at life? Do you say, oh, well, that's just Mother Nature? Oh, that's just natural. It's no big deal. Or do you realize that every tree has a different color that it turns, and at a different time, and it's an orchestra of beauty? And do you realize that this is God at work? And that day, God thundered. And He scared those old Philistine guys, so they start running, and next thing you know, the Israelites routed them and slaughtered them. And throughout the rest of Samuel's life, the Philistines didn't attack Israel again. Now the Philistines do attack Israel again because Saul had to fight them. In fact, Saul and Jonathan were killed by them. That's when David said, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." That's that incident. And David had to fight the Philistines. They had to fight these guys. But during Samuel's life, they didn't. But let's look at what Samuel did. He took a stone. He took a monument, a marker. That's all it was. And he called it Ebenezer. The third verse of that song that they sang says, "Here I raise my Ebenezer." And so you've heard this before. You've heard that in church. What does that mean? What's the word Ebenezer mean? And it's, don't get too thrown off by that word. I know it's kind of a strange word. We don't see it a whole lot anymore, but it just means stone of help. That's all it means, stone of help. And it's just a monument. It's just to mark that spot, and so that they could look back at it and remember that thus far has God helped us, he said. Up to this point in your life, God has brought you where you are. And it's good each year to pause and, boy, are we busy. I know how busy you guys are. I'm busy too. And it's so good to pause and just say, you know what, thus far, God has brought me through. God has brought me where I am. Has everything been perfect in my life? No, because I live in a fallen world. And there's been suffering and there's been tears. But God has brought me here, where I am. And it's good for us to give Him the glory, to give Him the credit that's due Him. Just like He thundered that day against the Philistines, how many times has He intervened in our lives? And there's a lot of things that we just think is just natural. But God did that. It's God's power that caused that to happen. So when we really begin to think about how good God is to us and what all He's done for us, then we can start to count our blessings. There's an old hymn that says, "Count your blessings, name them one by one." And we can live our lives never looking back and never being thankful, never setting up a monument to God, never pausing to thank Him. We can just live our lives moving forward to the next event. Or we can live our lives thankful and saying, I know God did this for me. I know that He is the one that provided my lifestyle, the food on my table, the roof over my head, my family, my loved ones, my job. I know that it's God's goodness. And we do our part. The Israelites did their part. They repented and they came back to God and they worshiped God and they sacrificed an innocent lamb. They did their part. And when the thunder happened and the Philistines were in panic, the soldiers didn't stand there and laugh. They had to rush toward them and they pursued them. It says all the way to Beth-kar. They pursued them and they slaughtered them along the way. So we have to do our part. But I want to be a person that's thankful. I want to stop and worship God. And when I see beauty in nature, I want to give Him the credit for it. I don't want to live my life as an ingrate. Do you? I know that there's things that we're all so thankful for. And what I want to do this morning is just give us all an opportunity, each and every person in here. And don't be shy, we're family. We're all family in here. But I want each and every one of you to come up here to the front. Now I brought some little Ebenezer stones direct from Walmart. And I want you to take a stone. And this is just your marker for today. This is for today. Thus far, the Lord has provided. He's helped. And then I just want you to share just that one thing. Now, I know it's going to be hard for some of you to stop at one, and so don't. That's okay. But just that one thing that you're thankful for, that God has done in your life.